Good morning again. Again, my name is Shawn. I'm the ESL program supervisor at Kirkwood Community College. I oversee all of our ESL programs and our instructors in 4 of our geographic locations. And so this kind of a presentation is kind of a summary of everything that Kirkwood does and kind of our projected plan and future for the next 5 years, and really how we're going to grow the program to kind of meet the needs of the local community here in Iowa City and Cedar Rapids, but also like the North Liberty area and in Coralville as well. And so the first slide number 1, just kind of shows our trend line of our overall numbers. We serve about 700 students a year, and that's not at one time because we do have students kind of come and go, but throughout the entire program year, it's about 700 students come in for ESL services in all of the locations. If you look at our next slide, number 2, that kind of breaks it up in our 4 locations. Iowa City is our largest program. You see that there was a little under about 200 students served last school year. And then our next program is Cedar Rapids. Coralville is a new program. It actually just opened up last year. So last year was the first year that it ran classes. And they got up to almost 100 students in just 1 year. And then our other program is in Washington, which is very different. And then slide number 3 are our languages. Our 3 largest languages spoken is Spanish, Arabic, and French. French is probably our largest because we have a lot of individuals that are in multiple, because we have like a lot of our Haitians speak Creole, but then also some French. We have a lot of our African population that identifies Lingala speakers, but also speak French. And so French is really our largest population, but it's a very diverse group of French speakers from different Francophone countries. And then Arabic and Spanish. But we do have kind of a myriad of other languages throughout. One thing that's different between Kirkwood and like the Catherine McCauley Center in Cedar Rapids is the Swahili population. The Catherine McCauley Center definitely serves a lot more Swahili speakers than we do at Kirkwood. We do not see a lot of Swahili speakers. Yeah. All right, moving into our next slides. So these are kind of our class sizes right now. And Kirkwood's kind of been at a dilemma that, and I'm sure, I don't know if you are aware of it, but most of our classes are full to capacity. So when a lot of individuals are coming to Kirkwood to sign up for classes, we're often pushing them away, saying, oh, unfortunately, classes are full. If they don't get in right in that sweet spot right when we're doing registration at the beginning of the school year, often we can't serve individuals because classes are already full. And so on slide number 4, those are our Iowa City classes. We try to cap them at 20 students, and you notice some of them are above because we often register beyond 20, knowing that not every student shows up to every class, and sometimes students drop halfway through a session. And so a lot of our classes are already capped past capacity at number 4. And number 5 is the same thing. Our Cedar Rapids location, they're smaller classrooms, so we cap them at 16, but a lot of those are also at full capacity. And then Coralville.
What's the blue versus the red?
Oh, that's a great question. The red is a waiting list. And so in the past, so last school year, there were waiting lists. So once a class got full, we would keep a list of individuals that wanted to sign up for that class, but we didn't have space for them. And as space became available, we would contact those individuals. That is different this year. These individuals that you see in red are on a waiting list because they have been in our program before, but they took a session off. So we're kind of saving them a spot. They may say, oh, I had this trip, I have to go to Mexico, but I will be coming back. So we'll kind of save them a spot, and we kind of keep them in this like special pool because they're already in our program, and we don't let their period of participation expire, so we still keep all of their data, and so that's why they're on there. But we don't keep a waiting list at the moment. I'll kind of talk about that later. I think slide 10, I'll talk about our waiting list procedures. And so yeah, that's our class sizes. So they're already at full capacity. Coralville, I think, is the most impressive, that within 1 year, that already got to full capacity in just 1 school year. That they were already capped at, a lot of them are at 25 already. And we cannot accept any new students in Coralville within 1 program year. Something else to notice with this data is that we've also started doubling up some of our high need classes. So right now we only offer levels 1 through 4 of ESL. And like if you look at in Cedar Rapids, like the level 2 and level 3 have already been doubled because those were high need classes. And within 1 year, that new section was already then almost to full capacity. So at like slide number 5, we have level 2 and level 2, level 3 and level 3. That second level 3 class within 1 year already got to full capacity. So we filled it, and we can't accept any more level 3 students, but there's still that need that we have individuals coming to register that need level 3, and we have to say, unfortunately, we don't have space for you. And so those are kind of the trends that I talked about in both 7, 8, and 9, is that we've doubled up classes, they're full, and then Coralville's been full within 1 year. Now moving to slide number 10 is talking about the concept of our waiting list. Last school year, we did keep a waiting list. So people would come, they would register for class, and if that class was full, we would say, hey, we'll jot your information down, we'll keep you on a list, and as space comes available, we'll contact you. And that list grew to 130 people really quickly within the school year, and it became unmanageable because by the time there was space available, we would start contacting people, but then phone numbers would change, we wouldn't get a hold of people, so then it was like, well, how long do we wait? At what point do we move on to the next person? People would be waiting on the list for 3 or 4 months before we'd even contact them, so they weren't even interested in classes anymore, and so we had to come up with a new system. And so this year, we have managed registrations. And so what that means is when individuals want to register for our ESL program, they contact our front desk. They either walk in or they call, and they actually sign up for a specific date to register for classes. And those dates are capped at a certain number of people. Like we will cap that date at like 10 people or 15 people. And so once 15 people have signed up to register on that day is no longer available. And so people are calling our front desk or walking in, and our front desk team is putting people into registration slots. And the moment that all of the registration dates are full, they tell the individual, unfortunately, classes are full, come back in 2 months, or come back in 3 months. And what we're using for a waiting list data now is how many times is our front desk person or ops member actually telling people, hey, come back again, call us later. And that's what we will see on slide number 12. So on slide number 12, you'll see blue and red. Blue are the number of people who have called or people who have walked into the front desk who said, hey, I want to register for English classes. Red are the number of people that were pushed away saying, unfortunately, classes are full, registration dates are full, we can't serve you, come back 2 months from now, or call me again 2 months from now. And so we broke it up for each month of the fall when we were doing our large intake process. And again, that reached out to about 133. So we're seeing about the same. That last year we had 130 people waiting on a list. This year we had 130 people come to us and not get placed into a class. And so we feel that need is about the same. There's still about a waiting list of 130 people. And so as a team, Kirkwood got together, including our president, Dr. Lori, actually reached out to the high school completion program, was how can we better meet the needs of this large waiting list? What do we need to do to increase programming, increase classes, increase locations to help meet this 130 people that aren't getting served? And so this was kind of our plan that we had created. And so moving to number 15, kind of our ideal improvements. I would like to increase here in Iowa City both evening and morning classes. I have the space to increase 3 more evening classes and 2 more morning classes, potentially almost doubling our evening classes. So we'd be able to offer 2 sections of each level, doubling it. Coralville, I also want to practically double the program too and do 3 more evening classes in our Coralville location. There are not morning classes in Coralville because of the way that building is set up. During the morning, it's mainly used for high school programs that a lot of high school students through Kirkwood, Iowa City schools all get bused there, and that building is full of high school programs during the day. So we only have availability.
This is the Kirkwood Regional Center.
Yeah, the Kirkwood Regional Center at University of Iowa at Coralville. And so we only have availabilities at night. And so we're looking at doubling our night program in Coralville. Cedar Rapids, we're looking at doubling, adding 2 more classes in their evenings. We don't really have space to grow anymore during the mornings because all of our classrooms are to full capacity. And then Washington really wouldn't have any change. And that's really all I can do with our current space issue that we have. Because of our building and the amount of classrooms that we have, that's all that I can do. And so that's kind of the plan, is growing those. The next slide, 16, kind of talks about our instructors, the amount of instructor time that I would need to increase and what that would cost for Kirkwood to get all of those classes and get the instructors. We're looking at extending the hours of our current instructors. I do, as a supervisor, have a little bit of an issue of teacher retention. I have a high turnover rate with instructors because all of our ESL instructors are part-time. We don't have any full-time instructors, so all of them are less than 28 hours a week. And some of my instructors are even less than that they're only like 10 hours a week that they're teaching one night classes, they're teaching 2 classes. And so really trying to offer more opportunities to keep instructors a lot longer. And so that's the instructor time. And then on, where do I want to go from here? I'll skip number 17 for now. 18 is our leadership plan of getting more leaders in those different locations. Right now, our Iowa City program just has one building coordinator, and that's Colleen Schmidt. I want to get a second, like a part-time coordinator in there as well too, because the program has grown so much, and if we increase those classes and those students, it would become almost overwhelming for that coordinator to have to coordinate all of it. So I want to get another part-time coordinator in that location where one person would be focused on all the morning classes and one person would be focused on the evening classes, and they would work together to do the registration, the intake process, and then also work and manage all of the instructors with professional development and training. Cedar Rapids has just a part-time coordinator, even though that coordinator oversees a program that was just as big as Iowa City 3 years ago, who's had a full-time coordinator. And so I'm really trying to get that coordinator pushed up to full-time, that they'd be a full-time coordinator. And then Coralville has a part-time coordinator right now, and I want to increase her hours to 28 hours just to help manage that increased program. So that's kind of the 3 areas of the increase of classes, increase of instructor time, and increase of administration time. Now going back to number 17, some of our other ideal improvements to kind of better meet the needs of the population. In the past, Kirkwood has only offered 4 levels of ESL, levels 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I've been a level 1 instructor, and something that I've noticed is teaching that level 1 is there is still this group of individuals that couldn't qualify for our level 1 class because our level 1 curriculum made too many assumptions on their abilities. Like, students already know the alphabet. Students have basic literacy skills in their native language. And that curriculum was not successful for a lot of our pre-literate students. And we really needed a better option for individuals that had limited educational opportunities in their home country, that had low literacy rates in their native language. And this was kind of their first exposure to the English language. And so we've actually developed it already, but a pre-literacy class, or we call it Beginning Basics. So it's below our level 1, and that's actually the class that I'm teaching now at night. So we have a night class and a morning class here in Iowa City that we just started this school year. And so that's one ideal improvement that we're trying to make, is an increased level on the lower end of better supporting these lower level students. We also want to do something on the other end and do a more academic reading class. We have a curriculum called Start Reading, that we're trying to do to really kind of help those higher level ESL students with the academic components so they can transition into those pathways of either HISED, the high school completion program, or they can move into the AEL, the academic English classes, that's for credit that they pay for, or into other post-secondary training. Because we're realizing that they're not getting a lot of that academic reading component. So we want to offer that on the other side of the spectrum, is kind of what other classes can we offer. So we're looking at beginning basics and then also academic reading are 2 classes that we want to extend into our program. So we would move into almost like a 5 to 6 level program instead of just a 4 level program. And so that's everything that's on slide 17. And so overall cost, looking at all of this expansions that we want to do, we're looking at a goal of about $150,000 is what it would take to increase all of those classes, instructor time, and administration time. And so our goal, as Kirkwood is trying to start this by July 1 of next school year, of implementing all of those classes with the instructor time. And so we are working right now, I'm working with our vice president and with our director of our program on fundraising efforts. And we're going around in Cedar Rapids, but also mainly here in Iowa City, and reaching out to local businesses to seeing if we can get donations on a 5-year system of they will donate a certain amount of money for 5 years so we can get a total of $150,000 for 5 years. we're reaching out to the different organizations in this area and companies and trying to do that pitch and really look at it from an employability standpoint with the way that our unemployment rates are right now, that we have this pool of educated individuals with work experience. Unfortunately, they can't tap into the workforce in this local community because of their language skills, that they're really lacking a lot of those language demands that are needed for that job. And so they are often seeking employment outside of our community. They're driving 30, 40 minutes to Columbus Junction to Tyson. They're leaving the community and getting jobs in factories where they can do that work with their limited English ability. And we're trying to question, how can we keep them locally? How can we get them the language skills needed, working with those organizations and those companies to kind of bridge this community, this workforce, into the local community to meet those needs. And so that's kind of our plan, and that's kind of the pitch that we're going towards with local businesses.
Do you have employers that are wanting to take a more aggressive approach like Nordstrom and actually offer on-site ESL and footing the bill for that expense and paying for instructors? Do you have other companies wanting to do that?
Here in Iowa City, the only organization that I've gotten feedback from is Mercy Medical Center, and looking at environmental services. And I've kind of tried to reach out to them a little bit, and that could be a goal that we're looking at in the future, is trying to develop something with Mercy Medical and their environmental services, which is custodians. And so getting a group of trained custodians to work there at the hospital and provide on-the-site ESL training to meet those language demands that they need to do that job and be successful to navigate employment in that facility. We do have a partnership right now with Goodwill, which is a light manufacturing certificate program. That is not long-term, it is very short. It's only 200 hours that they go, and they get 200 hours of on-the-site training, and then they get that certificate, and then they're able to access the like employment navigators. I don't know what they call them at Goodwill, but the individuals that actually help those individuals, like caseworkers, help them look for jobs in the local community.
You know, is Nordstrom still doing, are they doing another cohort, or where are they at with that? How many have they done so far?
I believe we just finished 5, and so we are starting another one. This will be our 6th group. We've had 5 already. This will be number 6 that we're starting here in the spring.
Are you able to speak to the success numbers of how many of those passed and are still employed, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to think. I know the retention rate has been very similar to, I think, Nordstrom's retention rate of average employees too. I know Nordstrom isn't quite happy with their retention rate. It's around 50%, 50-60% retention, so they're not super happy, but I think they have a retention problem in general with all of their issues that we're trying to figure out. How can we better meet the needs of the employees to kind of keep them on the job and keep them staying there? But for success rate and passing the program, our last group had 100% success rate because they have the way individuals are identified for that Nordstrom program is there's like an assessment component. So when they go through the hiring process, they go through a face-to-face interview, they're given a language assessment, and if they don't pass that, if their language skills meet our kind of in this zone of because there's like this zone that the language proficiency has to be at. If they're in this sweet spot, they will take those individuals and put them in one of our Earn and Learn programs, where we will give them 10 weeks of intensive ESL training. And with that 10 weeks, they're able to then go back to that assessment and pass it to meet Nordstrom's requirements to then enter the workforce just like any of their other employees. And that we've had 100% success rate on, that after the 10 weeks.
In that 10 weeks, they're employees of Nordstrom from day one.
They are employees from day one, yeah. But they're able to meet the language assessment requirements during the initial interview as if they were just a normal applicant. And so that I see as a success of, we had 100% success rate of passing the assessment component.
Community, where do you find your instructors?
That is a good question. I'm trying to think. I don't think any of our instructors were former students. All of our instructors are local, of course. Since all of our positions are part-time, no one really relocates to teach ESL at Kirkwood. And they're like, yeah, I'm gonna go across the nation and teach ESL part-time. So they are all local. I would say we kind of have 3 groups of individuals. We have one group that are kind of retired educators, that they worked in the public school system, they taught, they've retired, but they don't want to retire, but they've reached the point where they definitely want to kind of slow down. And so this is a great opportunity that they teach part-time, they may teach twice a week, or they might teach in the evenings. And we do have this large group of really veteran, professionally trained educators. Most of them don't necessarily have a lot of experience in ELL or ESL, but they have the teaching background. Then we have another group of students that are very culturally and linguistically diverse. So they're like, they're multilingual, they speak many languages, they've traveled the world, they've done, like I have instructors that have done Peace Corps, instructors that have done US Fellows, that's through the US State Department, where they send in teachers to then go to foreign countries and to teach ESL or TEFL in foreign countries. And so I have a large group of individuals that are like that too. That are.
What does the training look like to become an instructor?
The training. So I do so as the supervisor, I kind of work with their coordinators to do most of the training. The on-site process, I'd say, is pretty quick. We do training within about 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay.
And that's a lot of the training is normally more policies and procedures. A lot of it has to do with like technology, getting them into the access all the technology that they need to teach in their classroom, getting them all the passwords into all of the programs, taking attendance, getting on their rosters. When it comes to actual like pedagogical training, we really don't provide a lot at the beginning because the applicants that we apply normally have a background in teaching, that I'm not necessarily having to train them to become teachers. But I do provide professional development throughout the year. In Iowa City, our teachers get together twice a month, so we do an hour twice a month. One of those hour meetings is pedagogy, where I present a pedagogical topic, where we talk about teaching and what that looks like. To give you an example, the last one I just did was over comprehensible input, about how are we teaching in a way that our students understand what we're saying. And so I do prepare these topics that we talk about for an entire hour once a month. And then the other one is called Critical Friends, which is a procedure that was developed by the Department of Education, where one teacher presents a lesson that they did and they provide student samples, and then everyone else kind of talks about it and goes through these 4 steps of questions of analyzing the standards. What standards did they hit? Did the students have an opportunity to meet those standards? How can the lesson be improved? And we kind of go through like a group reflection process of like a PLC. And so I do that with the instructors twice a month throughout the school year that they're working, but nothing at that initial training, I would say, for pedagogy and teaching. It's more administrative, networking, working with the technology.
So the qualifications, it's not necessarily a certified teacher that you hire. Do you require?
Yeah, and so when you look at our HR website with the posting, someone just has to have a bachelor's degree. It's kind of the minimum requirement from HR. You have to have a 4-year bachelor's degree, and that is it. But our preferred requirements is definitely teaching experience. I look for people that have a master's in TESOL, or someone with a background at least in ESL or TESOL, preferably, especially for my coordinators. All of my coordinators have a master's degree.
Do you have any instructors that are from the community, or either refugees or immigrants that have advanced that teach?
I do not at this time. I had one applicant at the beginning of this school year who I interviewed and was really interested in having on board. She was an Arabic speaker from the Sudanese population, but she had a family emergency at the last minute and couldn't actually come on board as an instructor. She actually had to leave Iowa City. But I'm hoping she comes back. I'm like keeping my fingers crossed and keep her on my radar. But right now we do not have anyone from the local community. Well, I mean, no, I take that back. I do have one instructor who's from Kenya originally, but she's not part of the refugee population. I think she's lived in the United States for about 15 years. And so, I mean, some of my instructors are not native English speakers. But I don't necessarily say they're necessarily from this community either, because a lot of them, have migrated to Iowa City just like everyone else too.
Sure. So how do you do recruiting then, and what is the structure for like someone who becomes an instructor? This is part-time, so they're just what's the salary that they're paid?
Yeah, so with recruiting, Our HR department actually does a lot of the recruiting. That when we do have openings at Kirkwood, it's posted on our HR website, which then I know gets blasted out to a lot of other online platforms, like I think Indeed is one, Jobs in Higher Ed is one, because I've seen our postings on those sites as well too. And they normally do a lot of the requirement. To be honest, when I contact HR to open up a new posting, within a week I have about 6 to 7 applicants.
That's
And
it.
so I've never had to, but that's a lot. Like when I'm looking at filling one position, to
Yeah.
have 7 applicants to look at is actually a lot for a teaching position. And so like I feel very fortunate that I don't have to do a lot of recruiting. For salary, all of our instructors start off at 19, I think it's 19.20 an hour. So it's under 20, it's like 19 something an hour. And that as they stay at Kirkwood, the longer that they're there, that pay increases. Every time Kirkwood decides to do an increase, which is, HR told me it pretty much happens every year, but they can't say it happens every year just in case it doesn't happen. But every year there is like a pay increase.
So as you're looking to develop an extra coordinator down here,
Mhm.
is there capacity to have an instructor who may take both roles so they can have
Yes.
full-time?
Yeah.
That would change your pool of applicants.
Yeah.
If they were able to look at full-time.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I'm trying to find more full-time opportunities with our vice president, but that's something that I would like to do. Even instructors, I would love to actually lean more towards full-time instructors, getting at least one full-time instructor on. But the way that our program is funded and with the limited funds that we do have, it's been structured that all of the instructors are part-time and only administrators are half administration, half, because even our administrators also teach, just like with me, I teach a night class still too. And so we don't have anyone that's full teaching or full administration. It is always this kind of morphed half and half.
So what does a coordinator do?
Yep, our coordinator, and so like Colleen Schmidt, for example, here, oversees this building. So she's at the building all day, every day. They do the registration process. So as students contact our front desk or they walk in and get signed up for registration dates, she organizes that entire process. So she will contact the instructors and get 2 or 3 instructors to sign up for that registration date. She will then organize it, get all the testing labs set up, and have individuals come in and do that whole registration process. She keeps all of the documentation for it as well, that we have student forms and documents that we have to record. And they make sure all the students get pre-tested. And then throughout the school year, she goes through and monitors everyone's hours to make sure everyone is post-tested. We have really strict policy on pre-testing and post-testing students because of our funding coming from the Department of Education. We also have this thing called the POP, a period of participation, that our students cannot miss more than 90 days. They have to be active in classes and if they are gone for more than 90 days, they're then considered inactive, and they actually then are exited out of our program officially from a data perspective. And so we're constantly monitoring student participation, how long they've been in our program, and once they reach a certain number of hours, they then get officially post-tested. And that's kind of what my coordinator really does too, is really looking at those group of students in just that building.
So why do you only have one in Cedar Rapids?
I just have one here in Iowa City too.
Okay.
So I have the same. I have a full-time one here in Iowa City, and I have a part-time one in Cedar Rapids. I'm trying to make my Cedar Rapids one full-time and make and add a part-time one here in Iowa City. So I'd have a second one here in Iowa City and then move part-time to full-time in Cedar Rapids.
So what do you look for coordinators?
I look for, so like academically, I look for someone that has experience in TESOL, like has either a bachelor's degree in TESOL, which is, sorry if you don't know what that means. I realize I throw out a lot of these acronyms. TESOL is Teaching English to Speakers of Other Languages. So if you go to the university and want to get a degree to teach ESL, the program is called TESOL, Teaching English to Speakers of Other Languages. So I look for people that have a TESOL background, that have studied pedagogy, especially in that coordinator position. Because another role that coordinator has is a lot of professional development with those instructors, is really working with those part-time instructors, providing that professional development once or twice a month, and really working with them. And so I want a coordinator that has a really strong pedagogy background when it comes to TESOL, so they can provide that professional development with those instructors. Like, for example, Colleen here in Iowa City has a master's in TESOL, and has been teaching for about 10 years, I think, in adult ESL. In Cedar Rapids, my coordinator is Tara Brockovich, who has 9 years of teaching experience in K-12. She was special education and ELL, so she did both, mainly special education, but she was in Florida where most students are ELL students, so they really don't have specialized ESL classes because everyone's in ELL in Florida. Not everyone, but a very large percentage of the students are, and so she has that background, and she's here in Cedar Rapids, and so she's my coordinator, has that really strong background, and her specialization is differentiation of this idea of supporting students in multi-levels, that you have one class, students at all these different levels. How can you teach in a way that you're supporting these lower level students but pushing your more advanced students? And she really sees things from that like special education background. And so she's a great asset up in Cedar Rapids. And then in Coralville, my coordinator is Carmen Delgado Harrington. She has a master's in TESOL as well too. And she is a Spanish and English interpreter. And I know she works with Grantwood AEA in the local area.
Mm.
Do you, just out of curiosity, do you ever ask the students, like at the very end of the, program, what they wish would have been included in the curriculum that maybe they hadn't been taught? Because I feel like people go to English classes for a lot of different reasons, and sometimes they really don't really care about, speaking conversational English. They just want to know, for example, a lot of terminology in their fields back home that would just help them get a job here, and they don't really care about maybe things that other people would care about. So do you have like kind of a process of asking them how to improve a curriculum?
That is a great question. I have to look into it a little bit more. I know we do a student survey. So we do it about twice a year. So kind of like in the fall, and then we do it in the spring, and it's through SurveyMonkey that we send out. And for our lower level students, our instructors often print it off and have the students actually do it on paper, and they kind of go through it and they work together on it, because the survey is in English, but the instructor kind of scaffolds it in a way that the students understand the questions, and they go through them, and then they just get them back to me. But I'm trying to think of the individualized questions. I'm trying to think if there's any that are specifically curriculum oriented. I'm not sure. But I know it's just kind of a general, how do they like the class? What are their inputs of improving it and things? So I think there's a little bit of space for them to touch on it, but I'm not sure. I'd have to look at the survey exactly to see how, if there's a direct question about curriculum.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
When is what time of year do you guys do registrations for classes? Like, is it the traditional academic cycle, or?
Yeah, I'm gonna pull it up really quick on my calendar. So our program is a managed enrolled in program, which means we have official start and stop dates to our sessions. And we do 5 sessions throughout the year. So once we start a session, we will not allow any new students to start until the end of that session. So we start a class with 20 students, and we don't let any new students in that class. So that group of students is with that instructor for 8 weeks. And then at the end of that 8 weeks, we have a break. We normally have like an off week. And during that off week is when we're doing that registration process. And so in theory, we take in new students between each of our 8-week sessions. So I would say like every 2 months, more or less, there would be a registration process. So like, let me pull up the Iowa City night classes. I wish I had a projector, but like, so like this past program year, our large session started in September 4th. And so right before that September 4th, we would have had a 1 or 2 weeks, especially since that was the beginning of the school year, it was probably 2 weeks of registration where there were dates Monday through Thursday, mornings and evenings. So when someone would come in, our front desk would say, oh, here's all your options. Which one would you like to sign up for? And they sign up for one of those dates and times to come and register. Then our next session was October 29th, which was session 3. And so again, that week before, so between the week of October 18th to October 29th, was kind of that off week. One session ends on October 18th, the next session starts October 29th, and so that during that off week is when we then registering those students. But if an individual comes in at any time during that session, our front desk knows when those dates are. So if someone is calling anytime between September and October, they're going to be given those October dates, which on one hand can be kind of frustrating, especially I think for our refugee population. We see that in Cedar Rapids because they want English class now. Like, we need it now. I just got here, I need this now. And to tell them, oh, you have to wait 2.5, you have to wait 5 weeks to register, not to start, to register. And then you have to wait another week to then see what class that you're in. It can be frustrating. I understand that. But what Kirkwood has seen over the last 5 years when it comes to student retention and student success is huge since they moved to a managed enrollment program. That having a group of students stick with that instructor for an 8-week session and not allow new students to come in is so beneficial when you look at scope and sequence, when you look at accessing the curriculum, because the instructor is able to move along with those group of students. And when you have new students coming in throughout that session in an open enrolled program, the instructor is constantly having to go back to assessments, informal assessing the students, where the students at, preloading vocabulary, and the curriculum just kind of falls apart when you look at the scope and sequence. And so I know we have seen, at first, when Kirkwood switched to a managed enrollment, numbers kind of dropped because we were removing people from the program, because if they didn't meet our attendance policy, they were then removed from the program, so they were dropped. But then the next year, it kind of spiked back up, and then it increased steadily all the way up. And when we looked at student successes of making level gains, it increased exponentially because they were dedicated students in the program, not missing more than 3 classes in an 8-week session and meeting all those requirements.
So can they go from one level to the next in 8 weeks? Can they make it to the next level?
They can if they want to. Our goal is normally to try to keep someone in for a whole year. And so if I have a level 1, because I'm teaching level 1, that level 1 student comes in September, my goal is try to get them up to the level 2 class by next school year.
And they only have to register once.
They only have to register once, yep. So they register once, they're in that 8-week session, and then when we have our week off, I tell all my students, oh, remember next week we're having break. We will start on October, next Monday is our first day of class, come next week. So we take 1 week off. During spring break, during March, it's actually 2 weeks because we have 1 week off and then we have spring break. So I tell my students, we had class the first week of March, and then I told them, okay, now remember, we don't have class for the next 2 weeks. Our next class will be March 25th. And so then they come back. And so they do roll over.
So what is the last session for this academic year?
This year, our last session actually starting this week, March 25th. This is our first week. So last week, the last 2 weeks over spring break and the week before, my coordinators was really registering all of those new students. And then we're starting here March 25th to May 23rd.
And you don't do summer?
We do, we start at the end of July. So it's kind of summerish, but not really. I can give you that date. We'll be starting, I see your hand, I'll be right with you. Jean-Paul, I'll be right with you, 1 second. We will be starting July 29th of this year. Will be our session 1 of next program year.
And then I'm sorry, Jean-Paul had a question.
My question is there any difference between the program of the normally ESL programs that have existed at Kirkwood? Is there any difference or the same?
You're talking about the paid classes?
Yeah.
Yes, I would say there is a difference. One difference is our program is considered community ESL. Like that's how I project it as is, and a lot of states call it that they call it community ESL versus academic ESL. Our goals, really, I feel as instructors in our community ESL are meeting the needs for these individuals here in the community. We look at, are they navigating the community? Are they navigating employment? And our last goals, are they navigating pathways to post-secondary training? But that's really kind of I wouldn't say that's our most important. That is a goal that we have, but not our most important. Our most important first is community and employment, and then post-secondary training.
So
We
these
do
are
all 3.
No cost?
What?
These are all no cost?
Yes, correct. I mean, that's what we do in our ESL classes. Our instructors are preparing these individuals to succeed in the community, to succeed in their jobs. We do a lot of our instructors in the units that we teach. We do resume writing, we do soft skills versus hard skills. They integrate a lot of those like workforce readiness skills. Computer literacy is a big one. All of our instructors provide 2 lessons that involve computer literacy throughout an 8-week session. So in that 8 weeks, I know all of the students are hitting computers at least twice. That's our minimum requirement. Some instructors do it a lot more, but they're building those skills to kind of be successful in the workplace. Where the ELA program, it's called English Language Acquisition, the ELA program is definitely a lot more academic. They're really looking at how can I take this individual and they will be successful in intro to psychology. They will be successful into intro to anthropology. They will meet all of the language requirements for their general eds to get an associate's or a bachelor's degree. And that's really what they're focused on. They're heavily focused on academia and academic language, where ours is a more broad spectrum of how can we meet these individual needs of the students. On the AEL side, they have more levels. They offer levels 1 through 6, and their level 1 class, I would say, is closer to our level 2 or our level 3. They don't accept students as low as we accept students. We will accept students. Now with our beginning basics class, we'll pretty much accept any student at any level. Where the ELA program, they have to have a pretty good basic foundation to get into the paid ELA classes. And then they go all the way up to their level 6, which is beyond our capacity. And since our program is under adult basic education from the Department of Ed and is funded, we actually do have a cutoff, which is high school equivalency, like 12th grade. If someone comes in and takes our assessment and shows higher than a 12th grade reading level in English, we do not serve them. We actually recommend them to the ELA program. If they have the basic reading skills of a 12th grader and they're really looking for that academic language, they're looking for that specific vocabulary for their field of work, we really do lean them towards the ELA program. If they already have a graduate degree from their home country and have a really good understanding of English, the academic program would be better for them because their goals are really to study in the United States to get a post-secondary degree, and they need those academic components in the paid program. So,
Shawn, it
similar
seems like
difference.
you would have you have huge challenges it is just managing this and trying to grow it. How are you also able to manage the fundraising aspects of this that it seems like you need to do? It just seems like it could be over the top.
Yeah, I know. We'll see how it goes. I'm actually really excited about it. And I do have a team. It's not just me.
Okay.
That I have our director of our program, Carla Andorf, who also sees Iowa Works. I'm sure you're very aware of Carla. She's kind of spearheading it. And then also I have a lot of support from our vice president, Kim Betchika. And our current president, Dr. Lori, is the one that actually told us to do the fundraising. And even she says, I have people in mind. There are people that have come to her, our president, private donors that actually say, hey, I have this money, I want to donate it to Kirkwood. What would be a good program in Kirkwood I can make donations to? And our current president is really looking at trying to funnel those into our community ESL program. And so we have huge support from our current president. Our new president is really, and I don't know if you've noticed with a lot of changes of the signage of Kirkwood, but our current president is really about inclusive and accessibility of how can these non-native English speakers really access programs at Kirkwood. And diversity, really diverse backgrounds and accessibility are kind of her 2 big selling points. We have a wonderful new president.
That's fantastic.
Well, I would be happy to help make connections to
Okay.
the manufacturing community, especially in Iowa City, if you needed that, or just a sort of introduction to Kim or Lori or
Okay.
whomever to be able to do that.
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We can touch base afterwards. I'll get your contact.
Good.
And I'll get you in contact with them. Because I know my job so with myself, Carla, and Kim Betchika, I really took on the data aspect of it, of really kind of collecting and analyzing all of our data and demographics, and really kind of reaching out to organizations. Like I talked to Joan and really tried to get what is Cedar Rapids school seeing, what is the local community, and really trying to get all of that data information for us to present to local businesses. Kim Betchika, our vice president, and Carla are really kind of making the list of who are we actually going to invite into these pitches for fundraising. I know they have a large list of companies that we've sat together and kind of brainstormed, but especially since I'm not originally from this area either, Carla and Kim really knew more people and they had better networking than I did since I'm newer to this area and to this role.
Good.
But yeah, I'll definitely
That really
get in contact with them.
And something that we were working on through our community ed program at the Iowa City School District is just trying to get an assessment of what other English classes are out there. So you're the main show in town, but there are these other little, like Iowa City Compassion has a large program. There's Iowa City Friendship Community. So trying to have that maybe be a little bit more seamless would be great. And we have done things in the school district as well, but if we could maybe partner and have that be a little tighter so that maybe we give some curricular support or some professional development support. And then also when they, I want to start English right now, maybe refer them to the programs that are in the community that don't necessarily have those hard deadlines. So I would love to talk more about how we could kind of make this be a little more seamless is the best word that I can come up with.
Absolutely.
And something else, and maybe this is because we have done evening classes for the most part. Do you see a big drop off in January, February?
Oh, for
because
we do. So in the winter months, we do see a little bit of a drop off for various barriers. Transportation is a big one. A lot of our students carpool or they have family members drive them. In the winter time, transportation becomes less liable, and we see that reliable. I speak English. Say it with enough confidence, people believe you. Transportation becomes less reliable, and so we see them numbers kind of drop off a lot. So that's a big one. Another one I see is also employment barriers. In the winter months, a lot of their employers put more pressure for overtime. And I see that with a lot of my students, especially my night class students that work at Tyson, because most of my students work at Tyson. They say, hey, my supervisor made me work 2 more extra shifts. And they made me stay extra hours. And they're getting this pressure from their bosses to put in overtime that they can't make it to English class.
Because one thing that we brainstormed is traditionally we kind of ran the school year and we took the summer off. And we thought maybe we take off December, January, February, and go through June, July, August, because it's sunny, it's warm, there aren't the transportation barriers. So I think we're going to try to pilot something.
Oh, that'd be interesting.
If you're interested, talk to me.
Okay, that's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, Shawn Paul.
Yeah, I'd like to maybe, before we can talk about the partnership, I'd like to know if there is any difference between your program and the program that is being the English that is being taught in different areas, Compassion, Refugee, Association, and Catholic. Is it any different between your program and those programs?
That is a really good question, and I really haven't observed a lot of the other English programs to comment on the similarities and differences between them. One thing that I think I could make assumptions about was probably a big one is that managed enrollment. That with Kirkwood, we have that official start and stop date, and we don't allow new students, where I think a lot of our other community programs are more open, that as individuals come in, they try to get them into a class as soon as possible. And they're a lot more flexible. Another difference with our funding coming from the Department of Ed, we have really, really strict rules on assessing students and testing students and what that looks like. Where I think other programs, nonprofit organizations would have that freedom to kind of test the students however they want, whenever they want, and assess them. Where our students, when a new person comes in, the first thing we do is put them on a test. And I know it's not great, but it's hey, welcome, so nice to meet you, sit down and take a 2-hour test. I mean, that's literally what we do because we have to. We have to get that data. We have to get that initial benchmark of where they're starting. We have to give them 40 hours of instruction and then test them again to see where they're at, to prove that growth and to progress monitor that growth, to report it back to the state to get our funding. And that's the only way we can do it, where other programs don't have that. Also, when it comes to curriculum, I don't know curriculum-wise if it's similar or different. I know Kirkwood, we have a really strict scope and sequence when it comes to curriculum. We use the Ventures curriculum. We have 4 levels, so it's levels 1, 2, 3, and 4. When level 1 students are in that level 1 curriculum, at our session 1 at the beginning of the school year, they start unit 1. and they do unit 1 and unit 2, and then the next session, unit 3, unit 4, and they follow that scope and sequence throughout the whole year. If someone joins us in January, they're not going to start on unit 1 of the textbook, they're going to start on unit 6 of the textbook, and they're going to keep going through with the rest of that group of students. And I don't know if that's similar or different from other programs, but I hope that kind of answered your question, Jean-Paul? Yeah.
Did you say,
Go ahead.
Did you say that the cost of the class, there's no cost? Or it's
Correct.
Yeah.
Completely free. Even textbooks
Okay.
are free. Students don't pay for textbooks. That is something that we've kind of debated as a leadership team, is like, there are some programs in Iowa that do charge students for textbooks. And we were like, do we charge students from textbooks? Do we not? We've talked about maybe charging a fee of like getting students kind of financially invested of, hey, I spent $20 on this textbook. I have skin in the game. I'm going to take it, because we have had a lot of textbooks walk away. We've had students lose textbooks. We do send textbooks home with the students. And then if they just stop coming from class, we've lost that textbook. It cost us about $35 per textbook for students that we use. So I don't know, we've talked about charging students for textbooks. We have currently charged students for lost textbooks. If a student has lost a textbook and come back and say, hey, I want another one, they have paid the coordinator, but it wasn't full cost, it was like $20 for a replacement textbook.
And how many texts to complete the textbooks to complete the program, did you say?
About one school year. We try to get
So
through the
potentially
entire
five
5 sessions.
5 sessions.
Yeah,
So
5
that's
8-week
textbooks.
sessions. Yeah. Oh no, it's one textbook for the whole.
Okay, so it's the
yeah,
same textbooks
it's
for the whole thing.
It's the same textbook that they use for the same thing. Yeah, unless they switch levels. So if
Okay.
they get halfway through the year and we think, wow, their skills have really increased, we want to challenge them and put them in a level 2. They'll move to the level 2 and they'll get a level 2 textbook, and then they'll be there with the rest of those level 2
Got it.
students, which does happen.
Is your class schedule for the start and stop dates, is that online somewhere?
Yes, that's actually where I found it. My computer just died, but I Google Kirkwood ESL, and it's always like the first tab that pops up, but it is our Kirkwood ESL webpage, and you will see all 4 of our locations where it says Iowa City, Coralville, Washington, and then there's little PDF files for morning classes and evening classes for each of those locations. And it's a little bit confusing because sometimes they look the same, but if you look close enough, you're like, oh, that's a morning class schedule and this is an evening class schedule. But the dates are the same across the board. So like the session 1 dates are the same. But the start and stop time of classes are different based on its location. Like Cedar Rapids starts night classes at 6:30, Iowa City starts them at 6:45, Washington starts at like 5:30. So the times are different, but the dates are all the same.
Am I up?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm Kelly. I am the mobility coordinator, so I connect Johnson County residents with transportation.
Okay. Mhm.
So I want to meet your teachers.
Oh, okay.
And on that note, as far as me being a resource, since this is such a community-based program, are the teachers and some of those in-services that you're doing, how do they accumulate a knowledge of what community resources exist? So if a student comes to them and they have a need for food, does the teacher know where to send them? So I'm just kind of curious, how we can help you gain the knowledge of where to send some of these people for their different needs, whether it's transportation, food, housing. Does that get incorporated?
Yeah, it does. And that really, our coordinator, Colleen Schmidt, does a phenomenal job, especially since she's lived here in the community for so long. We do have an online folder for our instructors where they can access resources.
Right.
And one of them is community outreach. Our instructors normally start all of their classes with announcements where they announce community events and they announce different things about, I know we have like something from the shelter house. We actually have a shelter house advertisement specifically for like resume writing and job searching, that there's that job searching time that you guys offer. We do advertise that for our ESL students to go and look. I know the food banks, the food pantries,
Great.
and is it the Clouded Closet?
Crowd classes.
Yep, are ones that we also advertise, that we have
Right.
all that information. We even have the other ESL programs. We have a whole sheet of other community ESL classes that we do give out at registrations when people come and they cannot get into a class right away. Like if classes are full or if they come in the front door and we tell them, oh, you have to wait 2 months to register, but hey, here's a sheet. Here are other free ESL programs in the community.
Sure.
There's a conversation circle at the library. There's a group that meets at the senior center. Reach out to these organizations. There's also one we promote a lot is the International Women
Yeah.
International
Yeah, yeah.
Women's Club.
Yeah.
That they have a large ESL program for international women. We do kind of promote all of those as well too, but we definitely would be willing to look at more.
Okay.
Colleen Schmidt is definitely the person to really to get a hold of that.
Okay.
That when we meet with instructors, we're giving them those nuggets of information to reach out to their students. Trying to think of another one. There was something I was going to mention. I don't remember. When it comes to transportation, I know there's maps. We do have bus routes that we do talk about with students with.
Awesome.
In the winter time, do you guys advertise like places that people can get winter coats and things like that? Or like as the weather starts to cool down? Because I know at Shelter House we see a lot of demand for that. And we oftentimes get huge donations
Oh.
for winter coats,
Right.
you know, so.
Okay. That I don't know. I don't know if they've ever actually made it. I think it's kind of really kind of a case-to-case basis. I know a lot of our ESL instructors do a really great job of advocating for the ESL students, and that students do come to the instructors with individual needs or questions and help, and our instructors normally do a really good job of kind of referring them, or if they don't know, reaching out to Colleen or myself and being like, hey, where can I refer this student to get services? But we're constantly looking for